Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, episode 146. Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm extremely excited to be here. It's been some time since we've been back on the podcast, and I'm sure, and based on the message that I've received, people were missing the podcast, wondering what we were doing, and there's been a lot of things in the works for Life by Design for Chiropractors, a complete redevelopment of our model, a complete redevelopment of our offerings, our training, our coaching, some major changes with myself personally in terms of my practice and what I'm doing there. So look for those types of updates. But let's get right into today's episode. I'm excited to share with you really the first inaugural in a sub-segment of Life by Design for Chiropractors called Convos with Chiros, kind of playing off the Jerry Seinfeld comedians in cars or whatever that specific show is. And so I brought on a great friend of mine, Laurence Tham. Laurence and I go way, way back. In fact, I was joking around in some of the email copy that he was my first. So you'll have to check out this episode to hear more about that. And thank you so much for listening to Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic.
I'm just excited to have a conversation with you. It's been such a long time, but I gotta say, I love the copy. I love the copy. So I think copywriting is one of those skill set that most people don't appreciate. I think people just kind of spend some time just writing things,
Right.
And go, oh, like here's something coming up. But like the way you wrote that, that your first experience or whatever, made me read. And I think that's something to kind of, we're going to go off a little bit of tangent, but I think what reality is that chiropractors forget is that we are conversationalists. We are communicators. And the way you communicate in today's age, when people are scrolling Facebook, Instagram, whatever, we have to get people's attention. And I think copywriting is one of those skill sets that it takes time to learn. And there's not like, I'm sure there's classes on it, but it takes a fundamental period of experience to be able to get people's attention. And you got to remember, when you're writing copy for your patients and on a month-to-month basis or week-to-week basis or daily basis, even on your posts, it's really about engaging your audience and also keeping them activated to actually want to listen to continue on a reading. So that's the purpose of copywriting. It's not about, and I think people forget about copywriting is that they trying to write something massive.
Right.
They go, oh, I got to read. No, it's the copy. That's how I think about it. Copywriting is really about get someone to read the next line.
Right.
Not about read the whole thing. Just get person to read the next line. So don't spend so much time fluffing around. It's like, no, next line. And then eventually, if you're good at it, then someone will read the whole thing. So,
well, how funny is this, Laurence? You're not a teacher, are you? You're not a coach, are you? we were on for like 4 seconds. Yeah. I didn't even get the intro in 4 seconds, and Laurence is already, nailing out the content and coaching us up, which is fantastic. So I'm excited about this. To be totally honest, I have no idea how many people are actually watching the live version of it, but that's totally fine. If anybody is watching it, if you want to put a comment in the live chat, then at least I'll see that. With the pandemic, it is interesting, in-house in practice, we started doing our workshops through Zoom, and it's such a different, animal versus the live speaking and just managing all of the tech at the same time. We were talking about your setup, before we got going about, what lights are on and the cameras in the back, and then you're flipping through all the things and, people just see this finished product. And, like with the Zoom workshops I'm doing, I'm like letting people in the group, and then I'm checking the chat, and I'm still literally having a conversation, not even stopping. Yeah. And yet, you got the hands moving all over the place. I'm sure it's the same for you.
Well, it's like, it's got to be within this window, right? And then you got kind of do little things like this, and you got to go, what the hell is he doing over there? Switching screens. And, like the people don't see that setup when a live experience, you have all of these different ways. And I think, talking about communication is very, you got to understand your medium, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when you're one-on-one with a patient or with a client or, with a member, oftentimes it's a very different experience and in front of 100 people or even 10 people, or very different experience when it comes to Zoom. Like, this is where, when you look at politicians, for example, they're on their cameras all the time. Like, you really only have this space right here to create emotion, inspiration, or leadership in this space, where if you're in a crowd, you have all that room, just like that stage to kind of move around. So you got to know your confines and be able to change your communication style based on what you're given.
Well, I think I'm excited for this. This is the inaugural, really, Mike, our other Life by Design director, is asking me, so is this like a new bit you guys are doing? Is this a new, we've done the My Practice rules in the past, and I'm sure that'll come up today. This is still the Life by Design for Chiropractors podcast. We're hosting it here inside the retention-based practice group, which is a new group I put together. I'm sure we'll come up and talk about this over time, but this is our Convos with Chiros, kind of playing off the Jerry Seinfeld coffee with.
Am I your first guest?
You're my first guest.
I'm breaking your virginity again.
Again. Yeah. Well, if anybody read the emails, Laurence was my first. So we'll talk about that today. So, guys, if you're listening in, wherever you're listening in, whatever medium you're listening in, welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors. I'm the host, Dr. Jamie Richards. And, I'm here with Dr. Laurence Tham, and I'm excited. And actually, people are commenting now, which is fantastic. People are watching. So that's a really good thing, Laurence. And so here we are inside the group. What really prompted me to have you on, obviously our friendship was a big part of it, and we'll talk a bit about that in the past, but I've been talking a lot recently about the changes I've made in my practice with moving on. I'm still the CEO of our practice. I still own the practice, the majority of the practice, but I'm moving on to work with Life by Design for Chiropractors and some other projects. And that's a big step, right? Like taking that leap is really the name of the game today. And, what's interesting, and you did that long before I did that. And I remember back at the time, when you were selling your practice and kind of moving on into coaching. And I just thought, man, I was blown away, at the time, because I knew where I was in my own practice and my own evolution, to think that, that was even possible. Actually, in my mind, never even thought I would ever sell my practice. So, why don't we go back, talk a bit about, who you are, where you're from, how you got to where you are real briefly, and then we'll see where it takes us.
We'll make this quick because we got so much to talk about. Well, I'm from Toronto, Canada, obviously, and that's where we kind of met. We met back in '98, I guess. Mm-hmm. I went to CMCC. I went to the University of Waterloo prior to that. But then as soon as I graduated, about 2001, actually, just about a year before I graduated, I was part of WCCS. I was the president of WCCS in the CMCC chapter. And I went to Australia, and that was like my third event. And I went to Australia for a week straight after my wedding, after my honeymoon. And my wife went from Hawaii back to Toronto. I continued on my journey from Hawaii to Sydney. And that journey, just that week, changed my life a little bit, because I just went, wow, this is an amazing place. This is a place that just kind of hit me. And Karen and I just didn't have a place where we really want to kind of start practice. We couldn't figure out a town. We were looking at, like different places, Peterborough and Toronto and all that stuff. And when I got back from Australia, it just made me open my eyes and go, what if we just got the traveling out of our way? This is my mindset. I figured that it's going to take me 10 years to get my practice really pumping, and before I can take a real holiday and break to really kind of break away from, practice for 6 months and travel the world. So I go, me, I'm pretty dedicated to stick in for that 10-year plan. But then I came back, I'm like, well, what if we just traveled first? What if we got that out of the way? Right. I didn't go away for, the European thing that a lot of people do, their gap year and stuff. So I thought, let's maybe go away for a year, come back, and then we'll set a practice and we'll put our heads down and then, do our thing. So that was the intention, and I had my brother's wedding, which was 10 months later. So I knew I was coming back. So I left, and I believe my very first day in practice was July 1st. So I always remember that. It's the first day, obviously Canada's Day, and it's obviously a financial year. And that was 20 years ago. Right? So I think I was probably in our class, but probably the very first person to practice, because I didn't need a license at that time. You guys were all waiting for your provincials, and so I got to practice right away. And I can say in 2 weeks' time, I fell in love with Australia, and I said to my Karen, I'm like, I think we should stay. And the rest is history. I've been here since for 20 years. And obviously there's a lot of things that happen. We'll dive into it, but that's
so 2 kids right now. How old are the kids?
13 and 10. Yeah, I should probably suppress. I've been an associate, been a locum. I own my own, I brought a practice. And then in 2014, I decided to leave practice, went full-time in coaching, moved from Perth to Sydney. And that's what I've been doing the last 2 years, last 7 years, really traveling the world and having clients around the world and helping people really get aligned with their practice and really kind of amplifying, their version of what chiropractic is for them, and making sure that they are being seen and heard, and making sure that their life is aligned, and making sure that they're successful in what they're doing and changing the world.
And so, I think the place to start here is I forgot about, just even leaving Canada and then going to Australia and then going practice, leaving practice, going and, always making these changes. And the real topic here is leap. So let me ask you this. In looking back at that original decision, and I know you kind of brush it off like, oh, I just decided, and then your practice, you sold it. What were some of the considerations and maybe some of the motivating factors that helped you get over the hump? Because I think for a lot of chiropractors, especially now in this pandemic and some of the challenges they're facing, they're considering change in practice. They're considering, things that, whether it be leaving practice or changing the cities, adding associates, finding partnerships, whatever it is, but they're probably pretty tied down to, I need to do my 10-year plan. I need to make sure I have this in place. Like, how did you get over that and just took the jump in these different situations?
Yeah, I didn't learn this until much, much later. But there's a couple of things. Oh, actually, we'll talk about that in a sec. I think there's always going to be fear. So one of the most important things that no matter what you decide that you want to do, there's always going to be fear. So don't try to escape it, right? You got to confront it. And so the first thing that happens that you need to really is commit to something, right? That's the decision. That's the hardest part, right? And that could be from the smallest things. Like, you don't have to commit to big things. And sometimes it's about just committing, like maybe, the CrossFit Open is coming up, for example. It's like, have you never done a CrossFit Open? Like, I haven't done one. I've been in CrossFit for like 6-7 years. I've never done one till last year. I just committed because I was always traveling. So it never worked out, but I was like, you know what? First time, no travel. I'm like, all right, I'm going to commit to it. And once you commit, what's the first thing that happens? Fear. It's freaking scary, man. Like, and then what do you have to do? The first thing is is you got to find courage. Right? You got to find courage to figure out how to overcome this stuff. And then, and this is the 4 C's, by the way. It's from a guy named Dan Sullivan. Actually, he's a coach, not Dan Sullivan, the chiropractor.
Dan Sullivan, strategic coach, Dan Sullivan.
And he talks about, courage, and you find courage. And the next thing, once you find enough courage, you go, okay, I can do this. You go to capabilities, right? It's really about learning. You got to go find some capabilities to figure out, okay, well, how do I do that? Like, how do I actually get my body right? Or how do I make that leap? Or how do I travel? Or if we're going to move to a different country, like, what are the restrictions? What are the visa requirements? Right. And then once you get that, once you have a little bit more information, well, what happens? Well, you get more confident, right? And that's where the confidence come in. But most people are waiting for confidence before they commit. Right. And I think that's the wrong way, right? Right. When you have more confidence after you committed to something, having courage, and then you actually get capabilities, you get the confidence after. It's at the end. But here's the thing. You mentioned a whole bunch of leaps I've done in my life. Yes. The more leaps I've done, I've gotten more confident to take the next, to commit to more things. Right. I mean, the last 2 years have been crazy for all of us. It's one of those common things that we all went through in different varieties. Like, Australia, we're living in a prison colony. We're going to get to politics.
I think between Canada and Australia, we've got it all.
Exactly. I literally have an Australian passport and a Canadian passport, which is probably the 2 worst passports I have. So, but the whole point is that it made me think, right? It made me think again. And I think this is a really good point about leaping. I think when you get to a point where you are starting to question what life is about, and when you start to question about, what am I doing this for? Right. That is when the courage really kind of step in, because most of us don't want to hear that answer. I think it's really important to take that time and go, what are we doing this for? This is the same when I left Canada. This is the same what's happened in the last 2 years. This is when I left practice. Jamie, you and I both said we will practice. We kind of made like a pact in a sense. We will practice the day I die, right? Like, remember that? We made that, like, in the cafeteria, we made that vision statement. Yeah. And then, although that was subtle, right? But that subtlety definitely sat in my mind for a very long time, and going like, yeah, but I told myself I was going to do it. You can freaking change your mind, right? Like, it doesn't, and I know we know that logically, but at the same time, it's like, oftentimes we don't like to go against ourselves. But every day you should be evaluating whether or not, like, the path that you're on is the path that you want to stay on. And I think that evaluation every once in a while, every quarter, every year, I don't care what it is, but just take some time to reflect. What are you doing this for? If you're questioning about practice, like, why are you in practice, right? If the answer is, I love practice, I want to serve people, awesome. Like, do that. Make sure you go commit. It's just a reaffirmation, right? This is what you want to do. But if you don't check in, what we end up doing is, I'm sure we're all guilty of it, is that we get on this train and this train is moving at a certain speed. You don't want to get off because it's too hard to get off, right? Because you're stuck. And this is what 90% of the people out there are doing, no matter what profession you're in. You just kind of get stuck. This is the life. I mean, don't you get up at the same time every same day? Don't you do this pretty much the same thing? Don't you eat the same meals pretty much, on a maybe 5-day rotation? We just get into this rut. And
well, I think you kind of nailed it there, Laurence. And I'm going to ask you a question about this, because I think, we'll focus on chiropractors here. You are in practice, you're seeing patients, and, once you have a year or two out, you're generating revenue. You're like, well, life isn't so bad. I've got money, I've got things. I've often said that chiropractic is one of the few professions that you can actually be relatively mediocre at and be financially successful. So you can have a pretty brutal practice. I mean, the profit margins are good. And as long as you're just, not a total, out to lunch person, then you're going to be okay financially. But you also get locked into that, and you get locked into, well, I got these bills to pay, I got this house payment. And then, like you said, you end up on this track of doing the same thing over. So my question for you is, for someone, you're talking about your risk tolerance increases and your confidence increases the more often you do it. So let's go back to the first time you did it. Let's go back to a doctor who's in practice today and they've never really taken a chance. They've just been doing their 10-year thing. Where do they start? Do they start with making a commitment to something smaller? Do they, what's the actual strategy here?
Yeah, I think the overall mindset you need to have is that you don't need to leap every day.
Right.
Okay. Leaping every day is dangerous. Right. Because you
talk about that a little bit.
Well, I remember listening to, actually go and search this up on YouTube. I think it's Steve Harvey, that the Black comedian who has got a talk show. I don't watch it here because obviously it's not available here, but he did this like off comment in between set and talked about leaping. And he talked about how you don't need to leap every day, but once in a while you do need to make that leap. And I took that analogy of going, you know what, you need to make small little steps. Right? We need to make small little steps every single day. And the smaller step could be just like try different food, right? Maybe like do something different today. Maybe do a different workout today, and maybe push yourself, like, and just little things, right? Little things. Like if you never had chili before, try it once, right? That's why I encourage my kids, right? To just do little things different. Like just have something different. If you never, my kids are like, ooh, squid. I'm like, well, how do you know you don't like squid? Well, because, it sounds disgusting, but have you had it? Like, do you know? Right. And so it's like challenging them a little bit to just really trying to change their mindset. So start small, little steps at a time. When you move a little step closer to the edge, so there's going to be an edge at some point. But if you're able to take small little steps and challenge yourself to move forward, there will be an opportunity where you will have to make a leap. Now you can get closer and closer to that edge. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to take a centimeter. Now it's going to be a millimeter. Right? Like you're going to get closer. Right. But at some point, like you're going to have to make a decision like, okay, there's no more millimeters, like nanometers for me to move forward. Right. I'm going to have to jump. And when you make that choice, just remember to look back, like all of those millimeters and centimeters and meters you actually did take really have built that capability and courage and all the skill set to allow you to go take that chance. And you're probably not going to fail. Right. So that's what leaping to me is. I think people have this assumption like, oh, like, man, he takes all these risks. He's leaving this country and all this stuff. No, it's not that. We only see the leap. You never see the years that led up to that point. Right. The small little decisions that actually help you get there. Yeah, sure. People will go like, wow, well, amazing. Like Laurence is, leaving this country, or like he's dropping practice. But you forget about the years of thought that went into that and prepare. So I think that's really important. I think there's also a saying that I'll come back to your question, but there's 3 things I kind of remember thinking about failing. I think we need to fail more often, period. Right. I hate failing, but I think we need to fail often. But if you're going to fail fast. Right. That's number 1. Fail fast. Why? Well, because the faster you fail, the more lessons you're actually going to learn. Right. So which means it's really important to kind of learn how to fail fast on small things. Right. So fail fast. I think the other thing is I think is really important, is to make sure that you are failing forward. So if you are going to fail, right, make sure like you're going to fail forward by actually learning some lesson, right? Don't fail backwards, and don't put yourself in a position to take a chance on something that's actually going to put you backwards. So for example, if you're going to go, oh, I'm going to leave practice, don't just go, you know what, I'm going to go leave in practice, I'm going to do this thing, and then you give up everything, and then you actually are like financially or career-wise actually take a step backward. That's not necessarily the best move, right? The third thing I think is about failing firm. So failing firm means this. I think about, it's not top of mind, the guy who climbed Free Solo, right? If you watch the documentary Free Solo, the guy's climbing without a rope, going up to El Capitan, right? Those climbers are absolutely like insane. But here's the thing. We think it's insane because we never done it. But if you actually watch the documentary, there's moments of time where he just goes, not today. Okay. Rock climbers without a rope, he goes, not today. He needs to make that leap. He needs to make that jump in order for him to go. And there are days when he goes, you know what? Not today, but tomorrow. That's about failing firm, because if he misses that jump, he dies. It's over. He's done, right? You got to be smart enough that if you're going to take that risk, you got to be able to land on your feet and be able to go, I can do this again tomorrow. So I think it's really important to take risk, but also remember, most of us who take these leaps are not like super risky people. We're actually risk adverse, if anything. We're more people that actually go, you know what, there's plan B and C. If something bad happens, for sure, we actually have a backup plan. The worst thing that was going to happen when I went to Australia, like honestly, I said to Karen, my wife, like at the time, if we went there and we didn't like, I had 3 months worth of locums that was booked before I left. So that was helpful and comfort. I go, after that, we couldn't find a single word, we just come back to Toronto. Like, what's the worst that would happen? We just went on a 3-month locum holiday kind of thing. So it wasn't like backup plans. If you look at most successful people, like Bill Gates, people say, oh, let's not talk about the Bill Gates. But I mean, Bill Gates, for example, people say, you know, oh, he just dropped out of high school. No, he didn't. He deferred, right? That's not the storyline, because that's not sexy, right? Steve Wozniak, for example, when he partnered with Steve Jobs, he goes, no, he quit his job. No, he didn't, right? He did it part-time for a while, and then until he was ready to move. But the stories, these mythical things that we kind of create are things that it creates a great narrative. They dropped out of high school or whatever. No, most of them are just deferred. They already had backup plans. We just never hear about them. And so it creates this culture of like, we need to risk it all, burn the boats. It's not always the case. Now, sometimes you do, but most of the time it's that very risk adverse people.
Well, I think it brings up, a really interesting side conversation if we go down this path, and that's, I'm sure it's in lots of professions, but in chiropractic, years ago, to date us, we would go and watch speakers actually from a room where we saw them on a stage, and you would hear speakers and you would look to them and you would assume certain things about their life based on what they would say, or you would even meet them and say, wow, that person's, A, B, C, D. And I think now, same thing, social media, it's easy to look at people and say, oh, wow, Laurence is this, and, Jamie's that. And then I know for me anyway, I really projected that onto myself, and it was damaging for a long time to look at myself through the eyes of, these other gurus. And then of course you get the opportunity to meet some lived up to the standards. There were some great people that lived up to the standards. So I don't want to make it as if it was all bad, but a lot of times it was, there was a show that was being put on, and to some degree, I'm sure we do the same thing. I hope that we're authentic and people see that we're authentic, but at the same time, we are performing. And it's important for doctors listening to know that what you see online, both from other chiropractors, but also just everybody in your social media feeds, it's not all that meets the eye, and to not allow that to hold you back. And also at the same time, to not put you in the position where you make a leap where you're not ready to make a leap just because somebody else is doing it.
Yeah, it's you got to be careful. I mean, I've fallen in that trap as well, and I'm probably also perpetuated at the same time. It's infotainment. We got to actually, recognize that. But Jamie and you and I, like, we are strong, and in terms of our integrity, like, I hope, and this is my hope, because I don't really know, because I'm not a perception of myself, but I really do hope that I have projected and shown up on stage to be very aligned and authentic to who I am. I'm not going to say things that I haven't done. And if I haven't, I would say things, if I did say something that that I haven't done, I will actually pre-frame that.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. I for the first long time, for very many years, I was just like, oh, like this is how it's supposed to be, or this is the expectation. I'm supposed to see X number and all that stuff. And it creates this like narrative in my head, and I'm living up to comparison. And, it's not until the last, say, 5-6 years of my life where I really starting to reflect upon what's important to me. And maybe it comes with age, I don't know, but over the last, 5-6 years for sure, I've been really evaluating what is really important to me, right? Regardless of what anybody thinks. And that has, but again, by that, it's not just a simple question. It took me years, I would say at least 3 to 4 years of like deep diving into this and really thinking about it. And I'm still in the process, to be honest, where I feel now more confident in doing things for myself rather than doing something of what's expected of me. And this is the trap of profession, by the way. And this is not a knock on chiropractic, but it happens everywhere. It's any particular group. So we're all part of certain tribes, and there's the tribes who have certain rules and expectations from that tribe. And those tribes have this, they put on this expectation, right, on you that you're supposed to do X. And when you don't, you fall out of that tribe, or you get, kicked out of the tribe, or, alienated from the tribe. And that's hard for us human DNAs, right? To go, oh, I need to be part of this.
Right.
But it takes a lot of self-confidence or reflection to realize, I'm like, no, like I joined this tribe because of these reasons, but if you don't accept me, that's okay. I'll go find another tribe. That's really hard to do, but that takes a lot of self-reflection, self-awareness to be able to do that. And I struggle with this, to this day. But I think when a speaker says, I remember this one line, which was, you owe this to chiropractic, or chiropractic chose you. And it's like, well, like, and I loved that. I'm like, yeah, right.
For sure.
Years. And then I'm like, wait a second. Like, I actually kind of chose chiropractic. I didn't like, like, wait, I chose this path. And, and then like in this expectation of like chiropractic chose me, like I'm supposed to like fulfill, like, like spend the rest of my life doing this. I'm like, well, I choose the path I want to have. But that switch took years, right? To kind of get over, to recognize like, no, like these are just people just talking about whatever. And I'm like, oh no, I have my own path to choose.
Right. Well, it leads me to think about something that I believe a lot of chiropractors, and again, anytime I say chiropractic, I feel at this point, we could say businesses, professions, entrepreneurs, they all kind of fall within the same category. But, when you start to look at taking a leap, I think the one area that is completely untapped is this ability to leverage creativity. Like, people look at the practice the way it's supposed to be, the way your business is supposed to be, the way you're supposed to be. And to me, the fun part of all of this is to get creative. Sure, maybe somebody wants to have a 400 visit a week practice, but it would be more creative to figure out a way to be ultra profitable at 100 visits. You know what I'm saying? Like, what about that practice on 2 days a week? Could you do that? Would that be okay? Could you just coach? Could you travel? And I don't think people even allow themselves to be creative outside of what the expected norm is. And then they end up back in that, loop again.
Well, that's why I think the first conversation I have with any of my clients is actually, what are you trying to get to? Like, what's your vision for your life? Right. I don't care about your practice. I care about the vision, because the practice is a vehicle to accelerate your path towards that vision, right? And I think one of the biggest shift that I made with myself was recognizing that, because this is the shift from me leaving practice, okay? And I had this conversation with a good friend of mine, James Ton, and from Toronto, actually. We were in Ireland. I still remember this. I was in Ireland. We're walking around in Dublin. And one of the biggest shifts he said to me was this. He goes, I said, I'm in this tossing between like what I should, leave practice or not. I identify myself as a chiropractor. And see, that's the identity, right? It's really hard to leave the identity.
Right.
I'm no longer practiced. I no longer hold a license. I no longer can call myself a doctor or a chiropractor theoretically. But I'm like, wait a second. I'm still a chiropractor, but here's the difference. He says, you need to stop thinking about yourself as defining yourself as a chiropractor. You need to define yourself as Laurence Tham. Right. And you got to think of yourself as like a head of an octopus. So the head of the octopus, like that's Laurence Tham, and you have many tentacles, and the tentacles are all the things that you are, others see you. You're a chiropractor for sure, but you're also a father, you're a husband, you're a coach, you're a mentor, you are a son. Like those are all the entrepreneur, like all of those things are still the essence of who you are. And that little conversation switched in my mind. I'm like, oh crap, chiropractor is one of those vehicles.
Right.
that got me there. But entrepreneurship or starting a business or being a coach, there are also other vehicles. I can change cars,
Right.
Because my vision is just trying to become more who I am, right? That's who I'm trying to figure out. I haven't figured it all yet, but I'm still on that process. But that identity shift was really powerful for me. And I think when it doesn't mean that I'm ignoring chiropractic, I'm still in the profession, I still care for the profession, but it doesn't mean that I can't go do anything else. But when you're locked into something, this identity, it's really hard. And you see that happening with parents, for example, when especially when parents are been the mom for 18, 20 years, and then their kids leave, okay, well, their identity of mom, they're still mom, but they unfortunately lock themselves in, they have to be there for their kids, making lunches and all that stuff. But where did they transition? I think that identity is all part of us, but it's really hard. So I think being prepared and being self-aware that your identity the identity is you, not the things you do. That shift is powerful.
Well, let's talk about, as kind of this final piece, this idea of happiness. I think that's where this is all leading anyway, And I mean, that's to me, that's the end game. And that's what's led to a lot of these personal decisions. It sounds like it's the same for you. I just want to say blast from the past. I see Scotty Vatcher's commented here on our post or on our video. It's really fun to think about this too, since we'll just talk about this. You look back, and for those who don't know the history, I sent out the email to our list and posted in a few different places about Laurence being my first. And, we couldn't keep our hands off each other in the back of the room. I got a really good open rate and a lot of click-throughs, by the way. But, we had a lot of people join the group just from that particular email, and back to the importance of writing copy. Yep. But it's true. Laurence was my first. I remember practicing our seated lateral cervicals with the rubber band. Yeah. Getting our thrust down.
And do you remember what we said to each other? Okay, we committed. Okay, so that's the thing.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
So we committed. It goes, okay, in a week's time, we will do it. Right. We'll do it in a week's time. And do you remember what happened?
We did it.
Next day. No, it was the next day. 24. I'm ready.
Well, we both probably went home, and all night we're like,
yeah, we couldn't wait. We're like
practicing our thrust. Yeah, back of the room, CMCC, first lateral cervical.
At the top.
Yeah, we were pretty excited. We were pretty stoked about it. And just thinking of, we had our mastermind group, and Scott Batcher here was on a mastermind group. And just think back to that class, and even who was at CMCC at the time. In our class, our good friend Evan Hill and Norm Detillieu and all these, other guys and gals who have gone on to, make contributions to the profession. And then, James Chestnut, John Minardi, there's all kinds of Ryan French. I could just go on and on and on. All of those people were there, when we were there, which is really interesting. And so full circle, come back. You've left practice, you're coaching, you're doing some things. I'm still running our practice with our team, as well as the Fit Club, which is behind me. So if you hear weights start clanging around, that's what's going on in the cafe and Life by Design. But at the end of the day, the reason I made those changes is because I realized that not that practice had run its course. I mean, I love seeing patients, but there was other things that met my values more. And Laurence, I know this is near and dear to your heart. Same with mine. My dad passed away. You've had people pass away. Just shit happens, and you're like, geez, man, life is way too short to get stuck in this rut. And it kind of gives me goosebumps just to talk about it. It's like, you've got to jump, man. You've got to jump. And I'm trying not to swear here because it gets me fired up. But, for our doctors listening in, whatever that looks like for you, happiness to me is the end game. So if there's something about your life that you're not happy with, figure out what's next, figure out the step. Take the baby steps, take the leap. What do you want to add into that, Laurence?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me and my clients is really just, it's about happiness. You're headed, that's the ultimate what we're doing. And if happiness it doesn't have to be seeing 300-400 a week. It doesn't have to be and I love, one of the most things I admire about you was when you came up with Life by Design and you sent that to me. I think it was a B from memory, going back
yeah.
And you sent that to me. I'm like, damn it. I'm like, freaking me to it. I'm like, it was so good. I'm like, and I'm still living it 18 years later. I'm like, God, that's such a good name. But I mean, to me, that's inspirational for me because Life by Design, those 3 words are so powerful. And I gotta say, man, it's been a guiding light to me in terms of what I do. Life is by design, and there's even luck is by design, right? In the sense of what we create. And so you have an opportunity, for the docs that are listening, you have an opportunity to create the life that you want. Don't get stuck in thinking that this, whatever life you thought you wanted like 10 years ago, it has to be the same life you desire in the future. Like things change. And I use like my mom, like your dad passed away, my mom passed away this year, and I couldn't even go see her. I couldn't freaking leave this country to go see her. I can't even enter the stupid country, Canada, where I'm born. Like it's ridiculous, right?
Right.
And then go, well, that's not how I want to live. And so, and then you start thinking about, so here's, you asked the initial question, like, how do you make those leaps? Here's how I make my leaps. Okay. I'm just about to make a leap now, in the next 2 months. And here's how I make my leap. And this is the same thought process I had when I left Perth and left practice and moved here. It's the leap is this. I can pretty much know exactly what my life's going to look like for the next 5 to 10 years if I stay on this track.
Right.
Living here, seeing my kids in the school, and staying, wherever. That thought and just me thinking about that scares the living daylights out of me. Okay, no, I'm serious. It scared the living daylights. It scared me like daylights 7 years ago, and it's scaring me now. Maybe it's the 7-year itch, whatever, but it is scaring me. And that fear, that gut feeling, that is what provides the courage to go, I need to find something. Because this path, like, it's going to be a good life. It's comfortable life.
Right.
But for me, my personality, comfort stings. It hurts.
Right.
It's not for everybody. I'm not, don't be me. Like, but for me, it hurts. You got to find what's uncomfortable for you. For me, like that comfort life really stings. I left practice. I worked, so just for frame of reference, I worked 2 days a week. I was seeing I had a really high volume practice. I was making good money. I literally had young kids. I had 5 days where I didn't have to do anything if I choose not to do. Okay. When I told my wife that I'm thinking about leaving practice, she goes, what the hell are you thinking? Right. And for me, my job income went down. Like I'm like giving up everything. So, and the one thing I said to her, I go, it's because if I don't do this, right, it's not the person you married. Right. And that's the truth. Like if I could have continued practicing for 2 days a week for the rest of my life, but it wouldn't have been me. It would have just been a shell of who I thought I was going to be and just continue that path. And that fear is what motivated me to make the leap, to make those changes, and to jump. You get to that edge at some point, and there's a decision. You either walk away from the ledge or you take the leap and jump and see if you land on the other side.
Give me goosebumps, my friend. Seriously though, Laurence, you've just been an inspiration to me from afar. We don't talk on a regular basis. A couple of, Facebook Messenger from time to time, but I've always followed what you do, and I watch all your videos when they pop up in my feed, and yeah, you just, again, I love you, my friend. I hope our paths cross again sooner than later. Whether you're allowed closer, in the country, so. That's good. Well, like I said, I mean, we are here in this country as well. We also have a place in the United States. So, I don't know where we're going to be in the next 5 years either. So I'd like to cross paths with you and some of the other people who are really close in my life. Even people, like I said, it's not a product of distance. We've still maintained a very close relationship with very little conversation over the last 20 years, which I think is just such a testament to the connection that we have.
For sure. And I think that's the thing, guys, the lasting thing I would love to make sure that docs hear this is that I want to remind you of this. You do not have to make leaps every day. Like make small ones, make small little things every day to challenge your status quo and really find some like movement towards something that you may or may not know what that is. It took me many years to think about certain things. Remember that. It took me many years. I'm sure Jamie has been thinking about leaving practice for many years before he made the decision. Yep, it's not like one day he woke up like, screw this, I'm done. Like none of us do that, right? But it looks like it did, but it took many years. So take the time to reflect upon your life and go, what do I want? How do I want the next 5 years to look like? That's all. You don't need to think 50 years ahead. Just like, what do I, even 3 years or even 2 years, what does the next 2 years, and start making small little actions to allow you to start moving in that direction. Don't have to leap, just millimeters at a time. And eventually you'll start to get to the edge. And at some point, there'll be a point where you have to make jumps and leaps to get to the other side. And that's proof that, hey, this is the right thing or not. And if it isn't, then it goes to a different track. That's perfectly fine. But that's what life is. Life by design is you designing and creating the life that you want.
LT, where do people find you? Social media, websites, all that stuff. What's the handle? What's the website?
I don't even do much promotion anymore. Listen, I'm on, you can find me, Laurence Tham. I'm on Facebook. Drive Your Practice is my Facebook page, but like I do videos every single week. I try to talk things like this. Just really trying to give some advice. If you are interested, in coaching with me, then go to joinNitro.com. But yeah, I mean, you'll find me, message me, and I'm glad to, hope if I can inspire you and to make some changes in your life to really help you kind of get towards. But the key thing is you got to know who you are and where you want to go. And then just find the right people to help you get there. And that's it.
You got it.
I'll leave one more thing. I think most people are so caught up in like the action they need to take. I think oftentimes it's actually the other way around. I think before you take any action, it's more about how do you need to remove the anchors that stop you from moving forward in the first place. Like if, don't try to learn how to swim by just going to a swim class, figure out like all the anchors that are actually drowning you in the first place, and then go learn how to skill set to go learn how to swim.
Awesome. Laurence, thanks for coming on. Guys, thank you so much for listening to Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic.